And at this point, Tetra goes through her Regina George moment. Mean Girls is on the brain because there are a bunch of people in the Hanza who had never seen it before because they're all quite young. So we sat down a couple of days ago and watched Mean Girls and A Cinderella Story Christmas Wish, which was terrible.
But Mean Girls, one of the best films I've made.
One of the best films. See, Harold? See, Steven? Welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from GoodMorhen, and I'll be your host as I, and our international hanza accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cirilla of Cintra, across the continent. This Saturday, February 19th, some hanza members are meeting up in London. If you're local to the area or willing to travel, visit the hanza Discord and contact Ginteri, Elsa, or Sarah CC for more information. And that's not all the exciting things this week. February 20th, I'll be a guest on the Path to discuss The Witcher episode 206, Dear Friend, with Brett and Lucy. I'm so looking forward to recording with them later today, and you can hear my thoughts on episode 6 of the Netflix show a few months early. Find On the Path wherever you get your podcasts. This episode, we welcome Anna of Masala to our Patreon. They join our producer-level patrons, Louise of Covier, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B., Ava of Gullet, B. Haven of the Edge of the World, Charlotte from Vengerberg Glamorai, Red Kite, the Original Roach, Codringer's Cat, Libby, Claire Odell, Gennady Mandilovich, Wolf, Corey from the US, John of Riblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Kyle the H2 Ho, Silasab Sorcerer, a Toussaint Knight, and Roxas. This weekend, our patrons will receive the exclusive first episode of the Quiz of Surprise with Rob and Piotr. In the Quiz of Surprise, guests of the show go head-to-head in trivia about the content we literally just discussed. Learn more about becoming a patron of the show at patreon.com/breakfastinbeauclair. As for this episode, Rob TheUndeadGamr and Piotr from Witcher School return for a discussion of Netflix's anime spin-off film, Nightmare of the Wolf. Join us as we finally move past the wall of foreshadowing and into the final act of the film to discuss the depiction of the trial of the grasses in both the film as well as at Witcher School LARP in Poland, Tetra's Mean Girls moment, the consequences of mutagenic alchemy, the fall of Kaer Morhen, and the completion of Vesemir's arc from a carefree and detached Witcher to acceptance of responsibility and his destiny. I don't always talk about this, but I love this episode's cover art. It comes from the 1895 book, The Most Delectable History of Reynard the Fox, compiled by Joseph Jacobs and illustrated by W. Frank Calderon. In this illustration, Reynard the Fox kicks dirt and sand up into the eyes of Isegrim the Wolf, which I found to be perfect for the climactic scenes that we discuss in this episode. In lieu of our usual Tidings from Toussaint news segment, don't miss excerpts from an interview with Nightmare of the Wolf writer and producer Beau DeMayo and our listener call-in segment, Dear Friend. Without further ado, let's get to our discussion of Netflix's Nightmare of the Wolf, Part 2. Hey everyone, welcome back from the break. When we left off, we had met Geralt of Rivia's father figure Vesemir and explored his early childhood and life as a witcher. Vesemir's sword lesson and his fencing lesson turns into another flashback about his own childhood in Kaer Morhen. Vesemir and the other recruits are put through tests and the trial of the grasses. Most die at the hands of monsters or while undergoing mutations. Vesemir comes across the laboratory and meets Rydrick, a mage, who tells him about the hybrid monsters that mages have been creating for centuries to wipe out the elves in old races, and the witchers they made in response. Ileana sends Vesemir a letter. Their old estate and everyone in it has died, and they both need to move on. Vesemir, at the end of the montage, completes the trial of the grasses. So this is a surprisingly quick and dense scene for everything that happens. We flash back, and Vesemir and the other recruits are sleeping in the stables. And apparently, Vesemir is the only one who chose and volunteered to be there, which I think Robbie mentioned, whereas everybody else was either taken through the law of surprise or dumped into Kaer Morhen by their parents because they were just an extra mouth to feed. And Vesemir is here because he wants to become a witcher so he'll never be scared again, which is, I think a really interesting thing for a child to say. And then we kind of get to the actual horror of the scene. Vesemir tries to convince one of the other boys, Tomas, it'll be okay. We're here on Kaer Morhen now. We're going to be witchers. It's going to be fantastic. And after they go to sleep, the boys wake up in the Red Swamp. This is such a brutal scene. They are killed one by one by wraiths and monsters before Vesemir makes it out to the edge of the swamp. Holy crap, all of that was just so brutal to watch, and the whole time I was wondering, why? What is the point of this?
I agree with you. Pretty pointless, to be honest. If the numbers are dwindling, then why would you, just send those kids without any proper training, without proper equipment, into a bog to just die? Because, of course, the witches have to be tested. And they have to be tested in real conditions, right? So it would be a good idea to, for example, teach them, all right, so there's this beast, this is how you kill it, now you have a sword, go and kill it, right? No one will be helping you. If you die, you die. And that's cool. But just sending a kid, all right, so there's 100 wraiths waiting for you in that marsh, and yeah, good luck, bye. So this is more like dumb luck that he was able to just run away when everybody behind him was dying. So what was supposed to test, really? That he would leave his friends behind, or that he would, get a grip on himself, be able to survive because he would, be brave enough, let's call it, to just run away. But I don't know. I think it was one of the scenes that I didn't really enjoy, to be honest. I think that they showed the sheer brutality just for the heck of it. Just, okay, so this is a brutal world, kids die a lot. And didn't like it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a weird scene, right? It's a weird scene. I mean, I think just going back to when the kids are in the barn, right, and they're asleep, and it's just hilarious that Vesemir's like, "What? You didn't volunteer?" And it's like, "No, bro, I didn't volunteer. Do you know where we are?" Made me laugh. Also, you start to sort of see a little bit of that fatherly nature that Vesemir ends up having, where he's, really nice to Tomas and, trying to fill him a little bit with confidence. And you also get that when they then wake up in the swamp and he's like, "No, this is a test. We've all got to stick together. We've all got to do this. We can get through this together." And obviously it all goes to shit.
Right.
But the swamp in itself is just absolutely brutal. I mean, there's some really cool monster designs again in this scene, but it's just absolutely brutal. I also kind of can't wrap my head around it because it just doesn't make sense. You're dwindling in numbers. You already know the trial of the grass is only 3 in 10 kids survive anyway. Mm-hmm. And you're going to do that to them as well. You're going to make those numbers even less. It doesn't seem like a smart move.
Yeah.
I can understand it in maybe trying to test their initiative and their thought process or whatever and, trying to get through something like this. But it just seems very silly and brutal for the sake of it. Again, I don't know if that's just hey, the Witcher world is really dark and brutal and horrible. But yeah, it just seems a bit silly. Moving forward into that laboratory scene with Ryderick and chatting, that was cool. Getting to sort of meet one of the mages that creates witches and talk a little bit about mutagenic alchemy as well and why and how they've been created.
Mm-hmm.
And even sort of referencing it to if we can mutate and create hybrids and monsters, no doubt we can do it with humans. And hence that's why, witches became a thing, which was cool. And I also feel there's a little bit of foreshadowing there. Again, highlighting about monster crossbreeds through engineering with mages and alchemy. And yeah.
Coming out of the Red Swamp, Vesemir, is stuck in the infirmary and has this moment where he kind of looks up and realizes that everybody is dead, save for, one boy on his left, one boy on his right. And then he leaves and he actually takes Tomas's medallion from the tree and then just huddles in the hallway, sobbing over it. Yeah. And the horror that he must feel as someone who has fatherly instincts and comforted Tomas in the barn, in the swamp, and then just to know that he has all this emotion and he had so much hope for being in a better place after he left the estate. Mm. And I'm sure he feels very guilty about the whole experience too and being one of the few to survive.
Probably the first time we see him maybe regret his confidence.
Yeah.
Because he just breaks down, but he also sort of takes himself away to break down. Maybe he's now questioning himself a little bit.
Yeah, that could be a reason why he became, someone who detaches himself from other people, because he sees now that when he gets attached, people die. he can do nothing about it.
Mhm.
So maybe the best idea is to just, be this selfish person who has no one, because if you don't have anyone, you will not cry when they die. So.
As we move on to the laboratory, he meets Riedrich, and the mages have been experimenting with these hybrids, and he sees like something that I think looks like a frog splayed out, and Riedrich is like, yeah, there's like 3 species in here at least, which is really cool, but we learn a little bit more about mutagenic alchemy. Someone engineered hybrids to take out the elves and the old races. However, similarly to the Witchers, most crossbreeds die instantly.
Yeah, it's not perfect.
You can also see that mages are behind every bad thing in this world, because so they created monsters to kill elves. Then they see, okay, so now the monsters are the problem when they eradicate the elves. So maybe now we have to create something different to kill the monsters. And then they want to kill the witchers because the witchers became the monsters, and so on and so on. And there is no one who would be like, no, wait a minute. There is something with the mages going on.
I mean, I think the mages have clearly got like a really good PR guy that's just like, guys, I know what happened last time, but we got a plan. We got another plan. And everyone's like, okay, nah, they seem like they know what's going on now. It's fine. We'll leave them to it.
What a vicious cycle that they're finding themselves in. Deglin eventually finds Riedrich just like spilling all these secrets to the small child, and Riedrich's like, I don't really see a problem with telling him all of this stuff. Deglin's like, no, leave Vesemir. And Vesemir is still very upset about what happened in the Red Swamp. He threatens Deglin, and Deglin's just like, what are you going to do to me? The trial of the grasses, and recruiting witchers really is a numbers game, because not everyone's going to get through training and not everyone's going to get through the mutations. At this point, we actually see a montage of the trial of the grasses, and it's beautifully, overlaid with voiceover from Ilyana. Ilyana tells him that his father is dead. Ilyana had been adopted by a noble family and told Vesemir, I'm moving on. I hope you're having fun as a witcher. This is like really heartbreaking. It kind of plays with Vesemir's motivations and perspective. Does he regret coming? Can he even regret coming if he has nowhere to go back to?
I thought that scene in particular was really interesting. Obviously, you got the juxtaposition of the letter wishing Vesemir a good and happy life whilst he's going through the torture of the trial. One phrase I think really stuck with me from that letter, she's like, find your rebirth. And to a degree, Vesemir does. After surviving the trials, he's, reborn into this new body and this new life, because he's now a Witcher. So I just thought that was like really interesting, to be honest.
I agree, and what I just wanted to add is that I really, really liked the depiction of the Trial of the Grasses. It was really well done. The whole thing, the excruciating pain, the body changing, and so on, really well done. And yeah, juxtaposed with the letter from Ilyana, it really gave it a special personal touch that Vesemir is leaving his life behind finally. But did he? Well, we'll see, right?
Just out of curiosity, as we're kind of talking about the Trial of the Grasses, is that something that is explored during Witcher School? Or is that something that you're just like, you went through it already?
I knew you would ask it right now, but...
That's the whole reason why you're on.
I thought so, to be honest. No, but seriously, I cannot say much, to be honest, because Trial of Grasses is a part of the game, and when you come as a new player, one of the ending scenes of the episode, because Witcher School is the episodic LARP, so when you are a new player, in the end of the episode, you will undergo Trial of Grasses. Or not, because there are some choices as well, but mostly you will undergo the Trial of Grasses, and I cannot say how it is done, because I don't want to spoil anything, and most of our players tell us that this is one of the most exciting and really immersive experiences. To many of them, it's like, the thing that really highlighted the whole thing, that put the dot over the I, and this was so awesome.
Yeah.
In fact, many of them who, for example, return to us to some separate season and start with a new character, many of them decide not to undergo the Trial of the Grasses because they're like, okay, the first one was awesome and I don't want to dilute the experience and do it again because, it may not be as fun as the first one. But what we do is mostly we play on the senses of a player, because what I can tell is that the whole experience is done when you are blindfolded.
Wow.
This is what I can tell because, this is not a big spoiler. And when you re-emerge, if you survive, of course, you become someone different. No, but to be honest, I am not a very objective person right now, but I believe it is awesome and really cool. The person who designed it, because it wasn't me, it was one of our previous co-workers who is not working with us anymore, but she has done a marvelous job with it, and her idea is it's really awesome.
Imagine if you're one of those 7 out of 10 who just kicks it in the middle. It's like, oops, have fun for the rest of the weekend. Bye.
Yeah, this is why it's done in the end of the episode. So if you die, you can just go to your room and, there'll be like an hour of the game left. So you should be fine.
Oh, that's so sobering. Oh, man. I was making a joke, but if you actually do that, I think also kind of adds to the lore of the universe and all of that. In the next scene, we transition out of the Trial of the Grasses montage into Vesemir just living the life of a witcher. He hunts monsters and is showered in coin as payment. In a tavern, Vesemir tells 2 women stories of his adventures. An eavesdropping knight starts an argument with him and the other witchers and threatens them, starting a brawl. So this is a really interesting and fun little scene. Vesemir just standing there with the goblet as coin rained down on him. And interspersed with that is him fighting what seems to be a werewolf along the rooftops. And you get this really beautiful shot of like the 2 of them jumping from rooftop to rooftop with a full red moon. Yeah, and then we get into this small conflict, which turns into a bit of a big deal and is that little pebble that starts the avalanche.
Yeah, I liked the little montage. I just thought it was really, really cool. And just seeing Vesemir's smug little face when he's like fanning himself with those contracts and coin is just showering down. But the whole like montage kind of just reminded me of Triss's line from Betray a Moon episode in season 1. Whereas like, is that all life is to you, monsters and coin? And for Vesemir, yeah, it absolutely was. That's all it is. And he's proven that all the way through this film up to this point anyway, that, yeah, that's all his life is. That's great for him.
Yeah, I believe that then we see more of Luca, the other Witcher, who I have to say I really liked, the whole flamboyant thing he had going on. And the only shame is that he was the cat Witcher. How he behaved and so on. I hope that he would have, a cat medallion dangling on his neck. For some reason, I don't know, maybe some, exchange student from the cat school. As you can see from my mug,
Aww.
I'm a bit biased as it counts for the school. But yeah, I like the character, that he was different from Vesemir. The witches were not created from the same mold. And the whole argument with the knight, the whole exchange, it was so funny. And it also showed very clearly how much overpowered witches are compared to human beings. They destroy the knight, right? It happens really quickly. And yeah.
It's like a smash cut to like, oops, we did a thing. In the next scene, Luca and Vesemir are jailed for killing the knight, which, wow. Tetra tries to convince the king to execute them both, but Lady Zerbst counters. She secretly visits Vesemir in jail, revealing herself as Vesemir's childhood love, Ilyana. So this is very sweet, even if you could see it come from a mile away. Vesemir comes into this room, he sees a honey cake, and Ilyana just kind of materializes out of the corner, and she's like, haha, it's me. Again, a direct quote. Lady Zerbst / Ilyana is, old, she's got white hair, she's like 70, she looks stunning. And Vesemir looks like he's maybe 35. And she really has lived a full life in Vesemir's absence. So I think, again, this might be one of those moments where he feels a little bit of regret for not having the opportunity to grow old with her. But she seems to be doing quite fine as well.
Yeah, it's a very sweet scene and quite sad as well in some aspects. Because, it's possibly a life that Vesemir could have had with her. But, I'm not sure that would have been the case either way, to be honest. But yeah, it's a very nice scene. Ilyana's very smart. She's trying to very much appease both sides and try and do things correctly as well, where Tetra clearly doesn't want to. She's absolutely okay with having them be without a trial, just put to death. She clearly doesn't want any sort of challenge, whatever it is that she needs to do to achieve her means, which again, she shows. It's again nice setup for what continues to transpire with the Witchers and Tetra.
It is all about foreshadowing, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the buff scene, of course. Foreshadowing and the buff scene. These are 2 things that are very important.
It's what the people want.
The last thing that Ilyana tells us is that the king is willing to provide amnesty to him and Luca as long as Vesemir agrees to kill the monster in the woods with a chaperone who turns out to be Lady Gilchrist. And this can only go well, obviously. In the next scene, Vesemir and Tetra pursue the monster in the forests. It's an interesting scene just because the 2 of them clearly don't really get along or just don't really want to get along. On the path, Vesemir is just kind of like chittering about like, and then I did this, and then I did that. Tetra is just like having none of it. She really doesn't give a shit. And she has already committed herself to years upon years of hatred that Vesemir chatting to her for days and days is just annoying, quite frankly. One of the other things that we hear along this is that Vesemir says, isn't fire magic forbidden by upstanding mages? Which is something that we see in the books, we see in season 1, as well as season 2 of Netflix's The Witcher. And then at this point, we hear a little bit about why Tetra might be opposed to witchers. She tells a story about a sorceress who was killed because a witcher fooled a king for gold. Turns out that the witcher paid the cook to poison the king and then magically cured the king by killing a sorceress, and the witcher got away with it. Vesemir makes a joke, that's a good scam, I wish I thought of it. And Tetra is unamused, unfortunately.
Yeah, it definitely goes to show more of her mentality and her hatred for witchers, and very much seeing them as these scammers and corrupt beings of chaos. And Vesemir sort of nonchalantly being like, yeah, I wish I'd have thought of that. He's very much thinking, well, we're all the same. Like, some of us do the job, but, I don't think that's ever going to be an argument that you're going to have a win with Tetra. And I think we do also see that anyway as the film goes on. It's just very interesting just to have the two of them just open up more about where they're from, basically. Even more so that they end up having to work together and very closely together. And, they do kind of save each other's bacons a little bit.
Yeah, especially that if you do not know how the things are going to turn out. If you know the Witcher lore, you know how the things will turn out. But if you don't, then you can think that this is this whole played out thing that we start as opponents, but now we may, begrudgingly respect each other, and then maybe we'll even like each other in the end. So they really nicely played on this motive, that you can see them getting to know each other and maybe even understanding each other. But then we learned that the whole thing was a ploy on Tetra's part. So this was really nicely done, I think.
As we kind of move out of the night and into the day, Vesemir and Tetra continue through the forest. They come across an illusion, and Tetra tastes it and breaks it. So she notes that when she was in school, sometimes they would craft illusions and eat them in order to just make themselves feel full. Illusions always left a bitter aftertaste. So she eats like a pine needle or something and then dispels the illusion. And she nearly falls into a pit in the process, and Vesemir saves her. And by the end, you're just like, But they mentioned that the power needed to maintain such an illusion, that could definitely bewitch a Leshen, the one that we had seen in the beginning that also spoke the same language of Elion that Kitsu speaks. Once they dispel the illusion, they come across ruins. Kitsu and her pet basilisk are waiting for them. And so there's this gorgeous fight scene that happens between Kitsu the basilisk, Tetra, and Vesemir, and they're using their magic. Between the two of them, they eventually kill the basilisk. Kitsu sobs over its remains and then just brings an avalanche down in her grief. And then she turns into a fox and then just runs off into the mountain.
Very anime again. Literally, some of the ways in which it is shown that Vesemir uses signs, the Witcher signs, it reminded me of, maybe not of Dragon Ball, but at least of Street Fighter, Ryuk and Ken, Hadouken, and so on. So, again, very consistent, and I liked it. The only thing that I do believe was a bit on the nose is that, the elven girl that is changing into a fox, and her name is Kitsu. Many people probably realize that the Aguaras are the race of the shapeshifters, that probably Kitsu was the first off.
Yeah.
They are based on Kitsune from the Japanese folklore, so naming her Kitsu was like,
Very on the nose.
But maybe it's just me, just it's fine. Sometimes simple things are okay. But yeah, this has bothered me just a bit. But the whole thing, the whole idea was really nicely done, and yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I agree. Fantastic fight scene, really cool. As we said at the start, just really throwing themselves into this anime style unapologetically, just really, really cool. And again, another interesting, very stylized rendition of a basilisk. I didn't personally like it. I thought it was a bit weird. But again, balls to the wall into this style. Just really cool.
On the note of the Aguara, I don't know too much about them, but I know on the last episode of the podcast, or the last 2 episodes of the podcast, when Sarah A. from the UK was on, she was talking about how Season of Storms has Aguaras in it, which she really enjoys, as well as a comic called Fox Children that is set in the Witcher universe. I don't know too much about them, but it's interesting to see the lore and the mythology continue into Nightmare of the Wolf. When we get to the end of this fight and they kill the basilisk, Kitsu runs off. Vesemir mentions, like, her powers of illusion are unnatural. Eventually they go back and forth, and Tetra says, Kitsu's an elf. And Vesemir says, but why does she smell like a mar? Which was the monster that he encountered in the beginning in his childhood.
It's all coming together, y'all. It's all coming together.
I know. Between, like, Tetra and Vesemir, though, they keep eating things and sniffing things. It's like, just don't ingest this stuff. Stop eating everything. They're like children.
Vesemir, what did you pick up? Put it down. Don't put it in your mouth.
Don't put it in your nose. Oh, man. So in the next scene, Vesemir and Tetra follow Kitsu's trail to an abandoned elven school. They find Filavandrel bound and discover she's been kidnapping and experimenting on elven girls with mutagenic alchemy in order to turn them into what she's become. While Vesemir tells Lady Zerps the truth about what they found, Tetra destroys the elven school and tells Kitsu that Vesemir did it and uses the discovery of mutagenic alchemy to have Luca executed. The fallout of their battle with Kitsu and the basilisk is so destructive for everybody. Elves used to send their kids to school in high summer, and it was eventually used as a garrison by humans during the last cleansing. The Great Cleansing is something that we hear about in episode 2, 4 Marks from season 1. We hear about it in The Edge of the Worlds, the short story, as well as throughout the books. It's a place that I think has a lot of history and a lot of bad blood, which is just kind of exasperated when they walk in and they find a mountain of elven bodies. So this is when they find out about Kitsu's plan, and this is when the idea of mutagenic alchemy is proposed by Tetra. Someone makes the assumption that, if there are more monsters, there's more jobs, and there's more coin. And they discover one girl who's alive. Filavandrel picks her up and takes her to be raised as an elf, with the reassurance that if something happens to her, if she starts to display any sort of threat, that Filavandrel will be the one to take care of it. And Tetra just thinks that Vesemir and Filavandrel are making a mistake.
It's just so sad. The story of the Enshe, the elves in the Witcher universe, is just so sad in so many ways. And once again, we're shown this dark and twisted history and relationship with some of the original races of the world. From the Edge of the World story and the Netflix version of that tale, Filavandrel once again has got such a weight on his shoulders, like bearing the absolute burden of his people as best he can, to the point where, he's taking in this mutant girl to be like, well, she's mostly elf, so she's our responsibility. Tetra trying to kill her and being like, you've already won the war. What else are you going to try and take away? Like, leave us to our depressing little, huts to just do what we can to live. It's just so sad. But this whole scene, everything starts to really come together. Tetra playing her cards with Kitsu and getting her on side. It's just like, oh, man, yeah. It's just not good.
It really shows that the lore is there. We have the whole story of elves, and as Rob said, Filavandrel being the last, let's call him the leader of his people, who he really knows that the end is near. So he will try to do anything to stall the inevitable thing going to happen, which is the erasure of the elven race. Also, I like it that he said he will, take care of it. Like, this is our business right now. The responsibility is mine. And this is something that may influence Vesemir a bit, because, Vesemir to that point was this guy who didn't really do responsibility. Now he sees the guy saying things like, okay, there may be some fallout of this whole situation, but I will take care of it, and this is my thing to do. And remind me, because I'm not sure if that was the point at which Vesemir was like, okay, something shady is going around here. Because, the beast, the mutagens, so something is really fishy about the whole situation.
Because as soon as mutagenic alchemy is brought up as well, they all look at Vesemir as like, wait a minute, the only people that do like mutagenic alchemy are the mages that make witches. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think it all sort of clicks for everyone there.
It clicks for the audience as well, or it's at least starting to. If you haven't gotten it already, they're going to be very explicit in the next few scenes about, like, what is going on and why. Right. And at this point, Tetra goes through her Regina George moment. Just the scene where Regina has been betrayed, and then she goes and puts her own face and picture and name in the burn book and pretends that, like, she's a victim and watches the school burn. Is pretty darn close to what Tetra does here, right?
Yeah.
Like, Vesemir leaves immediately to tell Lady Zerbst what's been going on. In the meantime, Tetra brings down an avalanche onto the ruins, and I think she has her own like Sailor Moon anime moment here too, where her eyes go all blue and she like tears everything down. And yeah, Vesemir tells Zerbst about what they found. She tells him to flee to Kaer Morhen right the heck now. And yeah, when Kitsu comes back and discovers that her entire lab and everything has been destroyed, Tetra is just like, I saw the whole thing happen and it was Vesemir. And then she goes to the council and she's like, the Witchers are the cause of all of this. And they execute Luca, which is terrible because we're watching Ileana beg. And then the sword swings and you see the pool of blood fill the throne room. And it's, oh God, it's terrible. The whole thing is so terrible.
Yeah, 100%. But again, it was clearly the perfect situation for Tetra to really finally get what she needs and what she wants. And also, one thing that I thought was like really interesting when Lady Ileana was like begging and like after, unfortunately, Luca gets beheaded, she's like, by the way, anyone know where Lady Guildcrest is? Like, where's she at? Not suspicious? No? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's healthy to have like some suspicion of Tetra throughout the whole film.
Yeah, but this is the point when everything just fits right into the place, and now we are nearing the end game of the whole thing.
We finally have no more foreshadowing, only reward from here on out. Before we finish the film, we're going to jump to a short break and our new listener call-in segment, Dear Friend. When we come back, Rob, Piotr, and I will continue our discussion of Nightmare of the Wolf. Things are pretty quiet in the Witcher news cycle this fortnight, so in lieu of a Tidings from Toussaint segment, I wanted to share some insights from Nightmare of the Wolf writer and producer Beau DeMayo. Back in August 2021, he did an Instagram Live with Vortex Central discussing his work on the Witcher television series and Nightmare of the Wolf. Here are some of the insights I thought were most interesting about the anime film. Beau DeMayo said, I had just switched agents. They knew I was a Witcher fan. I saw Lauren had been working on the pilot and I asked my agent, so I begged them for a meeting. We had a last-minute meeting. I think she was scouting in Poland, and we Skyped and had a great conversation about The Witcher being a story about orphans and found family. 2 days later, I met with Netflix, and that next Monday, they asked me if I wanted to come on. I was writing the anime and my episode of The Witcher at the same time. I think it took 3 weeks to write episode 3 from outline to script. My intention with Nightmare of the Wolf was to have it feel like a question mark on the Witcher 3 map. It starts out like a very small quest for Vesemir, but then suddenly you're taking a boat to a medieval lighthouse for something that needs to be exorcised. I structured the movie to have that same kind of side quest feel. A lot of it came from my love for anime. Those high-level octane anime that are also about something. Gundam is about big robots, but it's also a socio-political drama about war. One of the most pivotal, Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. It's a flashback origin story that reimagines everything you've learned up to that point. Lauren came to me and said, we want to do an animated movie. I need someone to take this and run with it and for it to be their baby. One of the areas that fascinated both of us was the massacre and sacking at Kaer Morhen. It's in the opening song. I tell people to go back and listen to the lullaby. It's about how prejudice begets prejudice and violence begets violence. Tetra stirs violence against Witchers and Deglin does what he needs to do. Around and around it goes, and no one is acknowledging their part in that wheel. That's, for me, the theme. There's something nice to a villain with a legitimate point of view. There's one line Tetra has in the film. She says, "The Witchers destroyed your den." There's something scary about a villain who can use the truth to justify genocide. It's a little culty. You get Witcher recruits as kids and indoctrinate them. There will be some fans who take issue with that interpretation. I look toward the Spartans. That's what the Red Swamp sequence is meant to show. There's a cruelty to it. As an adopted orphan myself, there's a darkness in the idea of kidnapping children. Not capturing the fact that they're exploiting those kids would be doing a disservice. And Tetra says, I know you didn't ask for this, you were just a boy. If you think about all the kids that die in the Red Swamp that become ghouls and ghosts, there's something about Tetra taking the creatures in that swamp, most of whom are dead recruits, and setting them back against the Witchers. I made the decision to not use Geralt. I didn't want to tie up continuity, but the best way to understand someone is to meet their parents. Let's tell a cool origin story about the most unlikely father to Geralt and make every decision something opposite to what Geralt would do. We asked, who would raise Geralt? There's very little we learn about Vesemir in the books. And the thing I grasped onto was, when he was with Ciri, there was a mischievous character to him. He feels like the uncle who would say, here's an Oreo before dinner, don't tell Geralt. This came up in a lot of discussions throughout production, but if Geralt grunts at everything, Vesemir winks at everything. Thanks to Vortex Central for hosting. Unfortunately, the interview isn't available on their profile, but my notes and transcripts from the full interview, which includes commentary on Beau DeMayo's career, screenwriting advice, and The Witcher Season 1, will be accessible to patrons in this episode's Patreon post. Let us know what you thought of these insights and Nightmare of the Wolf in the Hanza Discord. Hey everyone, welcome to our listener call-in segment, Dear Friend. Keep on listening as members of our International Hanza share their thoughts on what we're discussing in this episode.
Hello. This is Christian from South Africa and Canada. An overall comment was the fact that they really introduced the politics of the world of The Witcher really well, I think. They're a hot topic of discussion, politics influence everything, and everybody has a rubber arm or a golden tongue.
Hey, it's Lars from Berlin. I love about Nightmare of the Wolf that it really dives deep into the Witcher lore. See King Dagriad of Cadwyn, for example. In Andrzej Sapkowski's dynastic descriptions, he is confirmed to be one of Ciri's ancestors, as a princess of Cadwyn had married King Corbett of Cintra a few generations before Ciri was born. Ciri's great-grandfather, King Dagriad of Cintra, was even named after King Dagriad of Cadwyn from Nightmare of the Wolf.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I live in Mexico. My only complaint about Nightmare of the Wolf was that it wasn't longer. I would have liked to have seen it as a series and potentially have some of the things that could have been developed a little bit more explained over a longer period of time. But other than that, I just really like to live in this animated universe.
Hello everyone, it's Franzi from Germany. The great thing about Nightmare of the Wolf is that you can find some tiny little details even after your second or third rewatch. When Tetra and Vesemir are going to the Elven ruins, Tetra talks about using magical illusions at the Academy of Aretusa to make food tastier. This could be a reference to a conversation Geralt and Philippa Eilhart had during the Mages' Conclave at Thanet Island in the book Time of Contempt. There, Philippa creates food with the help of some magic.
Thanks to Christian, Lars, Michelle, and Franzi for sending in their thoughts on Nightmare of the Wolf. Hear your voice in a future Dear Friend segment by emailing greetings@breakfastinbeauclair.com or DMing the podcast on social for more information. Hey everyone, welcome back from the break. When we left off, Vesemir and Tetra's search for Kitsu had gone awry, leaving Vesemir to confront Deglin, while Tetra made an unexpected ally. In the next scene, Vesemir confronts Deglin about the hybrids. He had finally gotten suspicious of everything that Deglin and Riedrich had been doing. But Lady Zerbst then arrives at the keep unannounced to warn them of Tetra's arrival. This whole thing is very intense, just because we think the big confrontation is going to come between Vesemir and Deglin, and then that gets cut short. Vesemir sees all the hybrids and is like, dude, what the fuck? And Deglin says, monsters were going extinct. I had to protect our way of life. And apparently Kitsu was part of these experiments. They thought they killed Kitsu, but he says she must have made an illusion and escaped. Deglin kind of puts the final nail in his own coffin by saying the only thing keeping men from hunting us are the creatures we keep away. That whole thing is just incredibly intense. And because it's a father-son, mentor-mentee relationship, there's even that greater sense of betrayal on Vesemir's side and righteousness on Deglin's, I would say.
Yeah, I think that in a real cool way, the whole thing shows us that in the Witcher universe, I cannot say that there are no good guys, but there are people who, even if we consider them good, they make mistakes and they have their more shady business going on. Up to this point, we're like, nah, this Guildress lady, she's a meanie. She's being wrong. She's putting everyone into the same bag. Just every Witcher to her is bad. And even Vesemir, who we can see now, has some saving traits to him as well. So when Deglin admits to his fault, and he admits that, yes, we created monsters, we can see that so Lady Gilchrist was right, and she has a point, and maybe she got a bit, overzealous with the whole thing, how to rectify the whole situation, but we can see that she has a point, and in fact, Witchers are a threat to humanity as well, even though they are supposed to be the protectors of the human race. So it's a very nice scene in which we can see that there are all shades of grey in the Witcher universe, and there's no black and white, really.
Yeah, and also, it's one of those things that everyone's the hero of their own story. a lot of The Witcher especially plays into that sometimes, you know, because there's always something I find in the villains or the heroes or whatever, whether it is you agree or disagree with them, there's always something or part of their story that you're like, well, I can understand why you feel that way and I can sympathize with you, which I think makes the villains, especially in this universe, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And you get that with Tetra completely. You know, love or hate her, like you understand why, and you sympathize to a degree.
And with Deglan as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You can also see his point, right? I mean, I do this because I want to save our way of life, so...
You know, as we said, that confrontation between the two of them, just because they have very different values. Like, Deglan will protect the Witchers even over anything else. And Vesemir, even though he obviously is concerned about the well-being of his brothers and his caste, will not sacrifice everything else in order to do that. So there's just that inherent battle of value when it comes to the two of them. As we said, that gets cut short. Lady Zerp shows up to let the Witchers know that Gilchrist is now outside with a mob of humans and mages. So apparently the mob heard about the crossbreeds, but are even angrier about the Witchers protecting elves.
Make it make sense.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that, like, you can't really wrap your head around the idea of, like, crossbreeds, or you can't really wrap your head around the idea of, like, scientific divine intervention. But
I've seen an elf before.
Yeah, and I know I don't like them.
Yeah.
Xenophobia, though.
The old-fashioned way. God damn it.
It's just like, so human. This is a threat, and then we actually get an understanding of the stakes. Riedrich says, if we die, if the mages die, there can be no more Witchers. Suddenly, if you're unfamiliar with the lore, the stakes are raised immensely. Not only was Deglan protecting their way of life, he was also protecting their future with Riedrich. Zerps decides to hide in the cellars with the children, so she'll protect the few recruits that they have left while the rest of the Witchers fight. Deglan leaves, Riedrich leaves, which just leaves Vesemir and Ilyana on this balcony right before this fight. They finally have their one romantic moment. They talk about the impending battle, and they go to kiss, and Ilyana's like, oh, but I'm 70, and Vesemir's like, I am too, and then they, like, have this moonlit kiss, and it's just like, oh, but they're both so hot. And then we do, like, a hard cut to the battle. The threat is established, the stakes are established, as is the romance that is also at stake.
Yeah, it's really sweet. You know, people are always like, oh yeah, Yen and Geralt. Nah. It's all about Vesemir and Ilyana. Let's go.
Yeah, I quite like the relationship throughout the film. In the sacking of Kaer Morhen, Tetra, with the help of peasants, human mages, and Kitsu and her monsters, leads a full attack against the Witchers in Kaer Morhen, ending in the fall of the Witchers and the keep. Deglan doesn't back down. Kitsu is standing in the red swamp, and she opens up portals that come out on the other side of Kaer Morhen, and they just unleash monsters into the keep.
What you said earlier on about the people, you know, I don't know about mages and monsters, but I do know about elves, and I don't like them. Because it was really stuck to me that at some point of the battle, the monsters start appearing, right? They're summoned by the mages and through the portals. And you can see the mob mentality, like, you know, all right, so there are monsters above us. They joined the fight. Something fishy is going on, but yeah, orders are orders. So let's keep on, you know, fighting the Witchers. We have our clear goal. We can just, you know, go on with doing that. And I'm not sure if I like the idea that there were also monsters during the, you know, destruction of Kaer Morhen, because it a bit invalidates the whole idea that it was common folk who killed the witches. And of course, in the source material, we have the idea that there were mages behind it, that of course they created the monstrum propaganda and so on. Not going to, you know, say any spoilers, but as we know, fate of Geralt in the books, there is a very poignant thing about the Kaer Morhen was destroyed in such a way in the books, and here we don't have it. We have this all-out battle with monsters, and here it really turns the Dragon Ball at some points when, you know, Vesemir is flying and pushing with art and just flying away. Really cool. Really nicely done. But to me, I think it was, on the one hand, it was a really cool scene, and a very epic scene. On the other hand, this was the point at which I was like, do they really understand the source material and how the whole thing should develop? But it's me, right? Many people will probably like it and don't really pay mind to it, so that's fine.
I have heard that critique as well from people within the community that, like, it makes for really good television, of course, like
Right.
having the monsters and aerial fights. And, like, the thing that really killed me was watching someone be decapitated and their entire spine comes out. And it's like, yeah, mages may have incited some of the propaganda, but it really was just the overwhelming surge of common folk and peasants that really brought about the fall of Kaer Morhen. It's one of those things where I feel like I don't mind it in the context of the movie. It does obviously, though, adjust some of the heavier themes and quote-unquote realities of what the history was with the fall of Kaer Morhen.
I totally agree that it, kind of takes the source material and very much is a bit blasé at that point with it, because you're right, there's something so poignant about just a group of peasants being able to, as well as being orchestrated by mages, being able to just ransack this Witcher keep and slaughter. Having that scene played out in an anime, I don't think would have had the same effect or impact, because everything's so overblown and so done, which is one of the charms of that style. I think having those monsters was probably necessary, even though it was very much gun-ho with the lore. And, it was done very well, was really cool. I think one of my outstanding moments of that whole scene was that massive Witcher group Ard, which was just so cool.
Right.
Yeah, so I agree. It's certainly taking a few liberties with the lore there, but I think for the genre that the film was, it worked, and it was necessary, I think.
Yeah, it totally fits the story. But...
Yeah.
But this is, I think, the only aspect of this story of the Night of the Wolf when I was like, it was different in the books, because the whole thing I really liked, and so I have nothing to say against it. It fits, but yeah.
Tetra openly admits to lying to Kitsu, which is nuts. She's like, yeah, oops, my bad. And this is the scene, Rob, that you were talking about, where the Witchers use their signs together and then fight the onslaught of monsters. Tetra here also says a quote that's taken directly from the English translation of the books, from Blood of El specifically. It either ends, or the whole quote is, "Witchers must be wiped from this earth, and all traces wiped with salt and saltpeter," which was a cool thing to, lift and bring. Deglin and Vesemir go to stop Tetra from attacking the mages, and Deglin stands there and watches as his Witchers are slaughtered one by one. Vesemir is taken into the sky, this is the aerial fight, and fights monsters on the way down. All of this is, again, like Super Anime 9000, and it looks fantastic. Again, like in the context of the medium, it looks great. Even if I did, sit there behind my hands and just squeamishly watch this whole thing.
There were some really cool moments that were in there. It was really nice to see Sven, his name? The witch with one arm?
Yeah, the one who gets beheaded with his spine. Yep, that one.
It was really cool to see, him casting signs and being disabled, for lack of a better term, which was just really, really cool. And him just kicking ass as well, which was cool. But yeah, no, some really cool moments in there. Really cool animation. Yeah.
Right, I agree. And the only thing I was thinking during the scene, and please tell me if there was an explanation, but I think there wasn't any, why the mages from the Kaer Morhen didn't, join the fight, didn't really do anything during the fight. I mean, what they were like trying to meditate or something. Maybe they were just alchemists. Maybe they don't really know any offensive spells and so on. But as far as I know from Witcher lore, every mage knows something how to fight. They learn some combat spells. So to me, it was like waste of potential, especially if you want to have an epic fight, then, add some more mages into it, and then it would be awesome. But yeah, so this was the thing I was like a bit of lack of logic in it. And I know that, they had to do it in that way because some things have to happen, and having, overpowered mages on your side would not help the whole thing to happen, so...
Yeah, I think if we learned anything from the books and from season 1 of the Netflix show, it's like, oops, all mages, that's how you get really awesome battle scenes for sure. I would agree, though, probably for this, I would assume there's only one of two explanations. Either one, they really are just alchemists, and they wouldn't really do very well against monsters, witchers, and humans. Or you need them to survive, and you can't even risk them being on the battlefield if you want to save the future of the Witchers.
Right.
So my guess would be either one of the two.
Yeah, I agree.
So the battle enters the keep, and then at this point, we're taken down to the cellars where Zerbst is there with the children. There's a little boy that says that there's a hatch in the grain holds that leads onto the back patio, and Zerbst tells the boys, go, run, get as far away from the keep as you possibly can, and so they do. Down in the laboratories, the attacking mages prepare to massacre the Witcher's mages, and they threaten to kill Lady Zerbst. This is horrifying. Like, they have all of the mages kneeling and they're really prepared to like execute each of them. Vesemir comes into the laboratory, but Kitsu intercepts him immediately and puts him into a trance. So this whole thing is obviously incredibly surreal, and there are 3 different mini scenes within this illusion. The first is old Ileana and Vesemir are kind of like on the banks of the river that they played on as children. They're playing in the snow. Ileana starts making a snow angel, and suddenly it turns into gold, and she sinks into it, which is very creepy, and Vesemir is like going through the golds trying to get her out. Suddenly, he's in a bar, and he's with Deglin, Sven, and Luca. They're kind of sitting around and drinking. Luca's head just slides off onto the table, and it's rolling around, and he's having a good time. And then all the Witchers drink tankards of blood as Vesemir sits there. He's then transported again to a lake house with Ileana. This was her dream, if you remember from the beginning of the film. She wanted to have a lake house. Ileana is painting his portrait, and their son comes over. Turns out they have another son. Meanwhile, in the real world, the mages are about to kill Ileana. One of the things that the illusion Ileana says, in order to get Vesemir to stay, she just says, time is nothing. Conversely, in the previous scene where they were sitting in the jail, the real Ileana had said to Vesemir, time is everything. So you're already seeing that small detail of like, there's something that's not right. Ileana offers him wine, or he picks up wine on his own, and he smells it and recognizes that something is wrong. So we kind of assume that he either smells the illusion and the bitterness of it, or he smells the scent of a mar. Yeah, and he realizes Kitsu's behind it and then starts threatening her from inside the illusion. Vesemir breaks the illusion by pushing Kitsu aside. He kills both guards and slices Tetra across the face, and then they immediately go head-to-head. Between Vesemir's skills as a witcher and Tetra's magic, it makes for an incredible fight scene by the end. Tetra attacks him with arrows, and he throws Kitsu aside. The fight scene goes on, and by the end of it, Vesemir beheads Tetra and stabs Kitsu through the chest. But it turns out to all have been an illusion by Kitsu, and he had really beheaded Rydrick, and he stabbed Ileana. When that illusion breaks, it's just so heartbreaking because you had spent the entire scene rooting for Vesemir, and you think that he had accomplished what he had tried to accomplish, but really he brought about the end of the Witchers and his love on his own.
And that is a real nice plot twist that you have this, illusion within an illusion within an illusion. I really liked it. As you said, the fact that Vesemir was fighting so hard to protect his loved ones, protect the school, to protect, everyone, in the end to be the one who brings the destruction on the school, of course, not on his own will, but still, it was really sad and heartbreaking to see it. Because at this point, you can also see the change inside Vesemir. You can see that he's taking the responsibility. He is now what Filavandrel is to his people. Vesemir is trying to emulate the same sentiment, and he tries to do right by all the people who are close to him. But in the end, it turns out that there was a bigger game going on, and unfortunately, he lost it, right?
Yeah, and I think with these big illusions, it was already sort of mentioned when Vesemir initially confronted Deglin about these monster creations that they were doing. And it just shows that, Kitsu's mutations with being part Mar are really, really ridiculously powerful. Especially in that first scene where Deglin is doing that exorcism, and we're sort of led to believe again that witches have got a bit of a level head, and they've got some sort of slight immunity to mind effects and illusions. But Vesemir, as a witcher, falls so very easily into 2 of them, and doesn't realize until it's too late that he's been completely tricked. And yeah, it's absolutely heartbreaking. But again, yeah, it shows how dangerous these mutations were and how dangerous Kitsu is. But again, everything just completely falls into place for Tetra.
Almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah,
I think almost, yeah. So at this point, we find out that Tetra is taking revenge against all Witchers for her mother, who it turns out was the sorceress in her fireside story. Tetra's mother's life in exchange for gold was all it was. And so Tetra apparently had watched and even says to Vesemir, your senses are so sharp. He must have heard me in the closet and knew that I was there. And to witness your mother's murder as a child and to carry that throughout the rest of your life clearly comes to a head here. After she makes this big reveal, Deglin kills her from behind. He made his way down to the laboratory and he collapses against the doorway and just says, all my boys, dead. They're your boys now. Turn them into Witchers. Make them something more. And then he dies. Vesemir looks up and he sees Kitsu in the ceiling, and she's just there in her fox form, and she just watches all of this take place, having really orchestrated the death of everybody in the room. Vesemir picks up Ilyana, and Ilyana says, just leave her. It's not Kitsu's fault that all of this happened the way that it did. And as they leave, Kaer Morhen burns and falls.
You know, all of this leading up to the fall of Kaer Morhen and Vesemir's experience, and now having the sort of fate of the Witchers on his shoulders, Deglan saying, you know, make them something more, I think really then starts to cement who we see Vesemir as later on in the books and the games and everything like that. Even sparing Kitsu, obviously Ilyana says, you know, just spare her, she's got nothing to do with this. But I think as well, he sees she's as much a victim of all of this as, you know, everyone else that was as well. So again, I just think it's another one of those things that sort of clicks for Vesemir to make him become who, again, we see him be later on in his life in the books and everything.
We don't hear about a lot of things in the Witcher universe, so to even get a little bit about the fall of Kaer Morhen, which was such a huge point in the lore and in the history of the continent, however it played out and with whatever creative liberties were taken, is still such an interesting treat to get as viewers and lovers of the world.
It's almost, you could say, it's always good to get something more.
Da-dun. And we have enough dad jokes for the episode.
I'm so sorry, everyone listening. I was surprised the listener invited me back, honestly.
Well, luckily for everyone, we still have at least a little bit more and the bonus content to get to. So more ripe opportunity to make fools of ourselves, for
Subscribe
sure.
to the Patreon.
We close out the movie. Vesemir takes the dying Ilyana to a lakeside, where she passes watching the sun rise over the lake. Vesemir finds the fleeing boys and tosses a sack of Witcher medallions at their feet with the choice. One recruit picks up the medallion, Geralt. You know, Vesemir brings Ilyana down to this lake. He sets her by a rock and uses a Witcher sign, it would be Igni, to make the lake melt. And as the sun comes up, she passes and Vesemir sobs. It's one of the most private moments and the most vulnerable moments that we see of Vesemir in the entire film. I think it's one of the few times where his guard really comes down, this moment with Ilyana.
It was a really nice scene because it was, as I said, very private. It was not, epic as the things that we have just seen. It really nicely also shows us that witches are humans. That the whole myth of them being, just mutants who have no feelings is just a myth. I think that maybe it's the last moment when Vesemir can really show his true self, because from that point on, he will have to carry the burden of being the last senior witcher, someone who has to, take care of the recruits that are left to him. I think that it has this really nice feeling to it, that something ends and something begins. Probably I'm not the only one who quote the book with bad jokes. And the scene with the boys, we have bold Geralt, how he gets the white mane of hair later on, anybody's guess. Of course, Eskel, Lambert, Geralt, so the three that we know from the books and from the games. But there's also Remus, who, as far as I remember, was in episode 3 of season 1. He was the first Witcher that came to Temeria to do the Striga. This was really cool that we have this a little bit of, nod to the first season of the Witcher series, so it was nice.
Yeah, that death scene by the lake is just heartbreaking, just absolutely heartbreaking. Animation is beautiful as well. That sort of like sunrise and everything. And, seeing that witches aren't emotionless mutants, we see Vesemir cry. As something ends, something begins. And, Vesemir going off to find the young recruits, the adepts, giving them a choice, giving them a chance to be something more, to be something better, as he felt he was given by becoming a witcher. It all comes about sort of full circle almost, that thinking there's something more to life and you deserve something more in your life. And the young Geralt thing, I don't know if it's kind of like cringy or kind of cute, but
it was a little of both. It can be both.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It was a nice cheeky Easter egg, and let's be honest, probably necessary, just to bring everything into the little Geralt, little Eskel, little Lambert, little Remus. It's hard to be mad at it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you see it happen on screen and you're just kind of like, what is that? But at the same time, there were a lot of, I think, memes on the internet with young Geralt with the little avatar arrow on his head. It kind of wrote itself. As you said, it's kind of necessary to actually tie in the continuity amongst all the media within the universe, which, again, because they have all of these outlets, it's really cool for them to be able to do. So, yeah, it was just one of those moments where like, oh, that's the end. And then it goes straight to credits. And as we do close out the movie and close out these episodes of Breakfast in Beauclair, do you have any final thoughts on Nightmare of the Wolf and the very first Witcher anime film?
I thought it was really good. Obviously, yeah, there was a few liberties taken with lore stuff, but, you know, it is what it is. I think The Witcher itself lends itself really well to the anime style. And I would absolutely love to see more in that style, in that genre. And also just seeing that universe in animation as well, I just think it's really cool, really, really nice. Regardless, just seeing it in a different type of media is just great. There's a lot of possibilities, and I think it's quite exciting with Netflix at the moment and this universe and this product to see what they can really do and push, I guess.
Well, I totally agree with Rob. The thing that we said in the beginning of this episode, that they were very consistent with the thing they wanted to do. They were very open with it, like, as we said before, you are either in or out, but this is it. There will be no surprises here, like, this is anime, you know, you either agree with it or not. I personally was really positively surprised with the movie, because I wasn't so sure about it when I saw, you know, the teasers and so on. But when it started, I got hooked really quickly. I like the plot, I like the characters. As I said, lovely dialogues. I really liked how the whole thing was written. And as we said, there were some mistakes made when it comes to Witcher lore. There were some plot holes as well, but come on, show me a movie when there are no plot holes in it. But all in all, it was consistent. The story was nicely told, and I think that it really fit into the Witcher poetry. The themes that we know from the books, from the games, and so on, they were there, and they were really nicely depicted. So all in all, it was good. I like it.
I'm certainly looking forward to more within the style, as you both said. You know, animation, and we know this, you know, from the games, of course, and the little cinematic trailers that they would do for the video games. But The Witcher and all of its supernatural elements just shine when things are brought into animation and CG, which is really cool. And we'll be getting at least one more film. And I'm sure we'll be very surprised as to what the content might be. Obviously, there's so much within the worlds and the lore that Sapkowski just didn't write. So it's really interesting to see a lot of these things fleshed out. And even if they don't fit, you know, as nicely into some of the content that's been done around the books or even around the games, it at least builds out and fleshes out the worlds that Netflix is creating, at least within itself, which is pretty neat. And I think it gives viewers and Netflix audiences even more to look forward to. So that is it for our show today. Piotr, Rob, thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and thank you to our Hanza for listening. So where can people find both of you, and is there anything that our community can help you with, or anything that you would like to share with them?
You can find me during the Witcher School LARP. So if you want to learn more, www.witcherschool.com. There's everything you need to know on our website. So yeah, I hope to see some of you. Alyssa, Rob, you specifically, because I just met you and it would be lovely to talk to you in real life. Other than that, everyone at home, just, you know, be safe, just spend safe holidays. Because I can say that, right? That we are recording.
Oh yeah, we're recording
Christmas, right?
The Sunday before Christmas. So happy February to everybody who's listening.
So happy February, exactly. I have to say that it was a real opportunity to be here, and thank you very much for having me, because it was really great. So thanks.
You can find me on the internet at TheUndeadGamr, gamer without the E. I stream on Twitch, playing various games. Goodness knows what I'll be playing come February, but stay tuned for that. Also, make sure you listen to our monthly gaming podcast, The Undead Gaming Cast, which you can find on most podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the like, where we talk about video games, the industry, and stuff and or things. And we have special guests and a few bonus episodes here and then. But yeah, it's a good time. Other than that, thank you so much for having me on again. It's been an absolute blast being able to talk about The Witcher with more Witcher nerds, which is always a great time, right? So yeah, thank you so much for that. And also join the three of us next week, where we'll be discussing Mean Girls, Regina George, and we'll answer the question of, does she even go here? Thank you.
At the very least, you can subscribe to the Breakfast in Beauclair Patreon, in which Piotr and Rob are helping me with a tiny little experiment in which they will go head-to-head on Nightmare of the Wolf trivia. So stay tuned for that exclusive content. They're about to do it, so we'll record that and get back to you. But thank you both so much for joining me. It's such a pleasure to open the season with both of you. I'm excited to meet you both at Witcher School one day. I have so many ideas for Witcher School-related podcast episodes. You have no idea. One day I'm going to do them, and I'll be so excited. But thank you both so much for joining me. And next episode, join us as we discuss The Witcher Season 2, Episode 1, A Grain of Truth. Thanks for joining us at The Breakfast Table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and complete list of our social platforms listening services, head over to breakfastandbeauclair.com. Breakfast in Beauclair is created by Alyssa from GoodMorhen. It's hosted by Alyssa with the Times from Newsant News and by Alyssa from Witcherflix. The show is edited by Alyssa with music by Witcherflix Media. Breakfast in Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City with Louise of Covey, the owner of the Turtle's Purpose, Katie the Redhead Dusant, Jacob B. Ava of Gallopy, Haven at the Edge of the World Sharp, Megberg, Glamry, Red Kite, the Original Rich, Conrad's Cat, Libby, Clara, Delja, Neiman Jelovich, Wolf Court from the US, John of Rivia, Tom from Australia, Jill Keith the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Kyle the Hichu Sally Cybe Sorcerer, Dusant, and Roxas. Special thanks to Rob and Piotr for joining us for this episode and our international Hanza for their support.